Have you ever had a moment when your entire life changed in the space of a whisper? When strangers became family and emptiness transformed into purpose? This is the story of how three identical little girls with desperate eyes approached a broken man in a café and whispered 6 words that would rewrite both their destinies. If you've ever believed in fate, in the invisible threads that connect lost souls to one another, stay with us, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more extraordinary true stories that remind us how life's most profound chapters often begin with the smallest moments. James Sullivan stared into his cup of Earl Grey, watching the steam rise and dissipate into the air of the small corner cafe. The tea had grown lukewarm, much like his enthusiasm for another day of going through the motions. At 42, he had the comfortable routine of a man who had given up on surprises. Wake up, work from his home office as a financial consultant, maybe call his brother on Thursdays, repeat. It had been 3 years since the accident that took his wife and daughter, and while the sharp edges of grief had worn down to a persistent ache, he still felt like a planet knocked from its orbit, endlessly drifting. The café was his one concession to leaving the house beyond necessity. Every Tuesday and Friday at 3 p.m., he would occupy the same corner table, order the same tea, and spend exactly 1 hour pretending to be part of the world again. The owner, Marta, had stopped asking if he wanted anything else months ago, understanding that his presence was about routine, not refreshment. It was a rainy Friday in April, the kind of persistent drizzle that seemed determined to wash away the last remnants of winter. James had been watching a young couple at a nearby table, their hands intertwined, faces animated in conversation. He remembered being that way once, before life had taught him how quickly happiness could be snatched away. He was so lost in thought that he didn't notice the 3 small figures approaching his table until they were standing right beside him. 3 identical girls, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, with matching dark braids and solemn brown eyes. They wore similar but not identical outfits, variations on the theme of purple sweaters and jeans, and carried identical pink backpacks. Triplets, unmistakably. Before James could ask if they were lost, the girl in the middle leaned in close and whispered with urgent intensity, "Please, pretend you're our father." James blinked, certain he had misheard. "What?" The girl on the left glanced nervously toward the cafe entrance. "Just for a few minutes. Please. We'll explain later." Something in their expressions, a mixture of fear and determination, cut through James's usual detachment. He found himself nodding slightly, even as his mind raced with questions. The middle girl, apparently the spokesperson, immediately brightened. "Thanks, Dad," she said, her voice now loud enough to be heard by nearby tables. "Sorry we're late. School project took forever." With practiced coordination, the 3 girls slid into the empty chairs at his table. The one on the right placed her backpack carefully on the 4th chair, as if saving it for someone. James watched in bewilderment as they unpacked notebooks and pencil cases, creating the perfect tableau of a father helping his daughters with homework. He noticed their hands trembling slightly despite their composed faces. "What's going on?" he murmured, keeping his voice low. "There's a man," whispered the girl on the left, her eyes fixed on her notebook as she pretended to write. "He's been following us from school. 3 times now." The middle girl nodded. "We told our social worker, but she said without proof, they can't do anything." Social worker? James felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain outside. "We're in foster care," explained the girl on the right, speaking for the first time. Her voice was softer than her sister's. "Our foster mom she doesn't notice much. She's supposed to pick us up from school, but she's always late, so we walk to the library. But this man started following us." James felt something stir within him, a protective instinct he thought had died with his daughter. He glanced toward the cafe entrance, scanning the faces of those entering to escape the rain. "Is he here now?" The middle girl gave a nearly imperceptible nod. "Blue jacket. By the door." James shifted slightly to get a better view. A man in his 30s with close-cropped hair stood just inside the entrance, shaking rain from his jacket. His eyes moved methodically around the café until they landed on the triplets. When he noticed them sitting with James, a flash of annoyance crossed his face. Without thinking, James reached across the table and gently ruffled the hair of the middle girl, the way he used to do with his daughter. "So, tell me about this school project," he said, his voice carrying clearly. "It must be important if it made you all stay late." The girls exchanged glances, momentarily surprised by his commitment to the charade, before the one on the right launched into an elaborate explanation about a science project involving plant growth. As she spoke, James kept the man in his peripheral vision, noting how he lingered by the counter, repeatedly looking their way. After a few minutes, the man ordered a coffee to go and left, casting one last glance at the table. James waited until he was sure the man had gone before addressing the girls again. "He's gone for now. But I think you need to tell me what's really going on. Starting with your names." The middle girl extended her hand formally. "I'm Lily. These are my sisters, Violet and Rose. We're the Gardner triplets." James shook her small hand, finding himself charmed despite the circumstances. "James Sullivan. Now, why don't you tell me why 3 young ladies are wandering around alone when they should be safely with their social worker, was it?" Lily, clearly the leader, explained that they had been in the foster system since they were 4, when their mother died of cancer. Their father had never been in the picture. They'd been moved through 5 different homes in 3 years before landing with Mrs. Winters 6 months ago. "She's not mean or anything," Violet, the one on the left, clarified. "She just doesn't really care. As long as we're quiet and don't cause trouble, she leaves us alone." "But she's supposed to pick us up from school," Rose added softly. "She's always at least an hour late, so we started walking to the library instead of waiting. That's when we noticed him." "The man in the blue jacket," James confirmed. The girls nodded in unison. "He never says anything," Lily continued. "He just follows us. Sometimes he takes pictures with his phone. We told Mrs. Winters, but she said we were making it up for attention. We told our social worker, Ms. Patel, but she said without evidence, there's nothing they can do. So we made a plan," Violet said, a hint of pride in her voice. "We've been watching you." James raised his eyebrows. "Watching me?" Rose nodded. "You come here every Tuesday and Friday. You always sit alone. You look safe." The simple assessment, "you look safe," hit James with unexpected force. When was the last time anyone had needed him to be anything, let alone a protector? "We decided if he followed us again, we'd come to you," Lily explained. "Pretend you're our dad so he'd go away." James ran a hand through his graying hair, trying to process the situation. "Girls, while I appreciate your trust, this is something for the police. If this man is stalking you—" "We tried the police," Violet interrupted, frustration evident in her voice. "They said the same thing as Ms. Patel. Without proof, they can't do anything. And Mrs. Winters got mad that we went to the station. Said we were trying to make her look bad." James felt a familiar anger rising, the same helpless rage he'd experienced after the accident, when the world's injustice had become unbearably clear. These girls, barely older than his Emma had been, were being failed by every adult meant to protect them. "Okay," he said finally. "Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to walk you home." "No." All 3 girls spoke at once, their voices blending in alarm. "Mrs. Winters can't know we talked to anyone," Lily explained hurriedly. "She'll say we're causing trouble again. Last time we caused trouble, she took away our books for a week." James frowned. "Then I'll call your social worker." "Please don't," Rose pleaded, her eyes filling with tears. "They might separate us. They've tried before, said it's hard to place triplets together. We can't be split up. We just can't." The desperation in her voice struck a chord in James. He remembered the countless nights after losing his family when he'd have given anything for someone to simply listen, to believe him when he said he couldn't bear the pain. All right, he said softly. I won't do anything you don't want me to do. But I can't just send you back out there if you're being followed. The girls exchanged glances, some unspoken communication passing between them. We have a plan for that too, Lily said. We take different routes each day. We never go straight home. Today we're going to the bookstore 3 blocks over, then the grocery store, then home. He usually gives up after the second stop. James marveled at their resourcefulness even as he was troubled by the necessity of it. Children shouldn't have to develop evasion tactics. How about this, he suggested. I'll walk with you to the bookstore and the grocery store. Just as, extra security. Then, if you're comfortable with it, you can show me where you live, not to interfere, just so I know. And maybe we can figure out a more permanent solution. The triplets conferred in whispers before Lily nodded. Okay. But you have to promise not to tell Mrs. Winters or call social services. I promise to talk to you first before I do anything, James countered. It was the most he could ethically offer. This seemed acceptable to the girls. They packed up their belongings with the same coordinated efficiency with which they'd unpacked. As they stood to leave, James caught Marta's eye from behind the counter. She gave him a curious look. This was the first time in 3 years he deviated from his routine or spoken to anyone besides her. He left enough money to cover his tea and led the girls outside. The rain had lightened to a fine mist, and the streets glistened under the gray sky. James found himself automatically reaching for hands before catching himself. These weren't his children, and he had no right to assume such familiarity. But to his surprise, Rose slipped her small hand into his left one, while Violet took his right. Lily walked slightly ahead, constantly scanning their surroundings with the vigilance of someone much older than her years. So, what kind of books do you like? James asked, trying to establish some normalcy as they walked. This simple question unleashed a torrent of enthusiastic responses. Rose loved fantasy, anything with dragons or magic. Violet preferred mysteries, especially when kids solve the crimes. Lily was devoted to biographies. I want to know about real people who did amazing things. Their animated chatter reminded James painfully of Emma, who at 7 had been obsessed with stories about space exploration. But for the first time, the memory didn't feel like a knife to his heart. Instead, it brought a bittersweet warmth. At the bookstore, James watched as the girls moved through the shelves with the reverence of pilgrims at a holy site. They didn't ask him to buy anything, seeming content just to browse. But when he saw Rose longingly returning a worn copy of The Girl Who Drank the Moon to its shelf, he quietly purchased it along with selections for her sisters. The look of stunned joy on their faces when he presented the books made something crack in James's carefully constructed emotional fortress. When was the last time he'd made anyone happy? At the grocery store, he noticed how the girls gravitated toward the practical, checking prices on bread, comparing the cost of different cereals. No requests for candy or treats. When he casually added some apples and granola bars to his basket and offered them as an afterthought, they accepted with a gratitude that seemed excessive for such small items. As they approached a rundown apartment complex, the girls grew quieter. James could feel the tension radiating from them. That's where we live, Lily pointed to a second-floor unit with faded curtains. Mrs. Winters should be home by now. Will you be okay? James asked, reluctant to leave them. Violet nodded. We're used to it. And we have our books now. She clutched her new mystery novel to her chest like armor. Thank you for helping us, Rose added softly. James knelt down to their level, looking each girl in the eye. Listen to me. If that man follows you again, or if you ever feel unsafe, come back to the café. I'm there every Tuesday and Friday at 3 p.m. Promise me? We promise, they chorused. As they turned to go, Lily paused. Mr. Sullivan? You were a really good pretend dad. Then they were gone, disappearing into the building with one last wave. James stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, feeling as though he'd awakened from a 3-year sleepwalk. The world suddenly seemed sharper, more immediate, and infinitely more concerning. He walked home in a daze, his mind racing. He couldn't simply return to his isolated routine knowing what he now knew. But what could he do? He had promised not to contact authorities without talking to the girls first. And they were right to be concerned. The foster system was notoriously difficult for siblings, especially identical triplets who would be seen as a challenging placement. That night, James did something he hadn't done since the accident. He researched. He read about foster care regulations, about reporting suspected neglect, about the rights of children in the system. He found nothing reassuring. The next morning, he called his brother Michael for the first time in months. "Jamie? Is everything okay?" Michael's voice was immediately concerned. James never called outside their scheduled Thursday conversations. "I need some advice," James said, and found himself pouring out the whole story. Michael, a family court attorney in a neighboring county, listened without interruption. "You're right to be cautious," Michael said when James finished. "If you report this officially, those girls could end up separated or in an even worse situation. The system is overwhelmed and underfunded. So what do I do? I can't just ignore it." Michael was quiet for a moment. "There might be another way. Let me make some calls. In the meantime, keep an eye on them if you can. Build trust. Document anything concerning." James hung up feeling marginally better. He had a direction, at least. But Tuesday seemed very far away. To his surprise, he didn't have to wait that long. On Monday afternoon, a knock at his door revealed 3 solemn faces. "How did you find my address?" he asked, ushering them inside out of the light rain. "We followed you on Friday," Lily admitted without a trace of remorse. "We needed to know where you lived. In case of emergency." "And is this an emergency?" James asked, noting their tense expressions. Rose nodded. He was waiting outside school again. "And Mrs. Winters is not well today." James understood the euphemism. "Has she been drinking?" Violet's eyes widened at his directness. "How did you know?" "I've had some experience with people who struggle that way," he said gently, thinking of his father. "Have you eaten today?" 3 heads shook in unison. "Well then, that's our first order of business." As he made simple sandwiches and heated soup, James observed the girls. They moved around his living room with curious eyes but respectful hands, looking but not touching. They seemed particularly drawn to the photographs he kept on the mantel, Sarah with her radiant smile, Emma blowing out birthday candles. "Is that your family?" Rose asked softly. James nodded, the familiar pain present but somehow muted. "My wife, Sarah, and our daughter, Emma. They died in a car accident 3 years ago." "We're sorry," Lily said, with such genuine empathy that James had to turn away for a moment. "Thank you. Emma would have been about your age now." Over lunch, the girls gradually revealed more about their situation. Mrs. Winters' bad days were becoming more frequent. Food in the apartment was scarce. Their social worker, Ms. Patel, was overworked and rarely checked in personally anymore. "And the man?" James asked. "Was it the same one from the café?" Lily nodded. "He had a different jacket today. But it was him." James made a decision. "I'm going to help you. But to do that properly, I need to understand exactly what's happening. Would you be willing to let me document things? Take pictures if I see this man following you, write down dates and times." The girls exchanged their typical silent communication before agreeing. "Good. Now, you should probably get back before Mrs. Winters notices you're gone. But first," he wrote his phone number on 3 separate pieces of paper. "Memorize this, then.